Welcome to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, where you can learn and be inspired by real-world examples of how technology is transforming businesses and reshaping industries in a language everyone can understand. Here is your host, Neil C. Hughes.
Welcome back once again to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, where every day we explore how technology is transforming our life, our work, our industry, and even world. And today, I want to explore how automation is helping close the skills gap by solving the shortage of data scientists and developers that the industry is currently experiencing. And also discuss the complexity of legacy systems and the many challenges that arise for enterprises when dealing with the complexity of legacy systems. And believe me, just saying that out loud gives me flashbacks from my IT days of a world where there was a server in a room that nobody dared touch, but nobody really knew what it did. I'm sure you've got a few of those yourself. Now, instead of having to deal with the number of workloads, databases, platforms, storage systems, security models, and so on, businesses are now looking for a one-stop shop for automation across business automation and also IT automation. So I want to learn more about that and also how automation has become the go-to solution to speed up the level of digitization to continue to grow at a competitive pace. So the big question, of course, is who would be qualified to talk about automation and all these subsets with me today? Well, I'm excited to say that Dinesh Nirmal from IBM to explore these topics together, and we've got so much to get through. So buckle up and hold on tight as I beam your ears all the way to California, where Dinesh Nirmal is waiting to share his story and talk about the work he's doing with IBM as we unpick the world of automation. So a massive warm welcome to the show. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
First of all, thanks, Neil. I really appreciate you inviting me to the show, and I'm excited to be here. My name is Dinesh Nirmal. I'm the general manager for IBM Automation, which is, an enterprise level capabilities that we bring to our customers to end-to-end automate their enterprise, whether it's the line of business, whether it's the IT, or the set of integration tools that help them bring IT and line of business together. So we have the whole tool set to bring automation to enterprises.
And I'm really excited to dive a little bit deeper into the subject of automation. But before we do, I'd love to take you back before automation was even a thing and when you were just starting out in your career, or possibly even younger. Can you remember where your passion for tech came from? What lit the spark in you? What put you on this path? Or should I say, what's your origin story and how did you get here?
So, really good question, because my passion has always been around data.
Yeah.
And even when I was younger, I would always read, whether it's history, to see there is a relevance to the future events that has happened in the history. So I was big into the Russian history. I used to read Russian Revolution and the whole, but that's a different story. So I was really focused on the data side of things and how we can use data to really somewhat predict future. And that got me hooked into the database side of things. And that's what led me to IBM and IBM database. And my first job was in the database side of things. And then I continued that journey on the data side and, how data can be used for AI and AI for predictability. And then that led me to the automation side, where I really think that everything in life is a workflow. Like if I were to get in the car, drive to the bank, and get some money withdrawn, come back home, and all of a sudden that's a complete workflow. And that workflow has driven two things, Neil. One, data, because that data can be used to say, can we automate that workflow in itself, or what part of that workflow can be automated? And that's what's driving process mining, for example. The second piece is event, right? That workflow has driven an event, which is me driving to the bank and really withdrawing that money is an event. And that event can be used by that enterprise to say, hey, this event triggered. Are there more events like this? And can we use this data and events to automate that workflow? So eventually I realized that we are all a living data source. My age, my race, my salary, what I have done, my friends, everything is a small database or a data source for everyone else to use. So I correlate everything to data. And since you asked me, I mean, that's my passion is, and I truly believe that it's all, every single decision, every single step we take, task, process, workflow drives data. And that data gets stored somewhere and is used to make future decisions. So that's where my passion is, all around data, and was. And I continue to really, look into how do we get more data, and whether it's the workflow, whether it's the event, and help our customers using that data.
Wow, what a great story. And I love how it was that path that led you to IBM, and that curiosity to use data to help predict the future. And of course, if we look back at the last 2 years alone, the world has changed so much. But I'm curious, from the conversations that you're having with your customers that are located all over the world, what are the key industry challenges and trends that businesses are facing today? Because I would imagine that there's a few similar trends between all your customers, right?
Yeah, I mean, every customer has challenges, right? I mean, So I would say that if I look at the future, Neil, there is basically two things I would say. Every enterprise would want to drive simplicity into their enterprise. Because you look at it, right? I mean, this is not a mom and pop shop we're talking about. We are complex enterprises. And complexity exists partly because for decades you have been using multiple systems. Now new type of observability, new type of systems have come in. This all exists. Skills have left. I mean, some of the people who developed these systems in the 70s, 80s, and 90s probably have moved on to different jobs. But these are systems still working really well. But then the new systems have come in. So the complexity of enterprises, I feel like, is one of the biggest challenges they're facing, is that how do you simplify it? And that's why if you look at the whole focus on automation is all about taking the complexity out and bringing the simplicity in. I was with a large airline manufacturer, and they said to me, Dinesh, our focus on automation is taking the complexity out and bringing simplicity in. And I thought that was a really good quote, because it is true. How do you bring automation in to, for example, take a process or a workflow that has 10-way multiple joins, multiple human touch points? How do you take that, and that calls different APIs? How do you take that workflow that used to run for 30 seconds, and can you simplify it into multiple workflows or multiple tasks and multiple processes? Can you run it in below 3 milliseconds? All of a sudden, you brought simplicity in, you brought optimization in, you brought clarity in, and you brought savings in. So one is obviously, how do we take complexity out and bring simplicity? The second piece I think enterprises will focus on going forward and using automation and data is all around digitization. I mean, think about it, right? I mean, everyone wants to digitize their enterprise. And digitization cannot be done without digitizing labor force. Meaning, there's so many tasks that we do that can be automated. I'll give you another simple example from real life, Neil. If you look at the 70s, right, a lot of time was spent on cleaning the dishes. We automated that using dishwasher. Very simple example. But what that has done is has given you time to go focus on high value tasks. Could be spending time with your kids, could be watching TV, whatever else, but it has given you time to really go focus what's unimportant. But you have automated that whole dishwashing task. The same thing is happening in the digitization phase, is all around how do we digitize human labor? So when you look at human labor, I would say there are three core things. If you take any human labor, right? One is obviously a persona. Who are you? What is the level of personality you have within that enterprise? What is your title? All those things. Two is credentials. What kind of credentials do you have to access certain systems, get into certain buildings, all those things. So level of authority, level of security, all those things, right? And the third is skills. What skills do you have? what are the skills that you encompass? Is it financial skills? Is it HR skills? Are you a programmer skills, right? I mean, those are the three core things within a human labor. So when we look at a digitization of human labor, I would say, how do we do those three things within an enterprise? So for example, one of the technologies we are developing is around Watson Orchestrate, and digital labor is focused on three things. And for an enterprise to digitize human labor, you have to do those three things and bring systems that will make them available. So you asked a really good question. I would say those are the two core things that enterprises will challenged with is one, the complexity. I mean, nobody understands the complexity, especially coming with a public cloud, hybrid cloud, behind the firewall, the systems and legacy that exist, new applications that's coming online, new demand and growth that's driving, that's all adding more and more complexity. And second, in the part of the complexity and moving into the simplicity is digitization and digitization of human labor. I would say if I have to summarize in two things, I would say those are the two core struggles enterprises will go through. And both of them are somewhat on the way, meaning everybody's trying to make it simplified. And everybody is on a path on digitization, whereby which there's huge savings that's coming along with digitization. Long-winded answer, but since you asked me, I wanted to give you clarity on that.
No, that's a perfect answer. And if we look back just a few years ago, I think there were many, many businesses out there that were incredibly nervous and cautious about automation and automating certain tasks and roles and freeing up staff to focus on more value-add activities. But since then, of course, we've had the great resignation, and people want more and want to be focusing on value-add activities rather than just doing repetitive, mundane tasks. But I'm curious, how is IBM planning to accelerate automation adoption and also help guide businesses through that whole process? Because for many, it is quite daunting, isn't it?
Yeah. I think, when we talk about automation, Neil, a lot of customers, especially in the past, get worried. Or get nervous because automation always meant that you are eliminating human labor. There was always that, thought process that all of a sudden, if you automate something, the human labor is eliminated. Partly because look at the manufacturing side of things. If you look at a manufacturing floor 50 years ago, it was all human beings who did it. But if you look at it today, that same manufacturing robots or machines that's doing that. So people have perceived that automation monologue with completely eliminating human labor. But the truth of it is that automation, what it does is really enable humans to go focus on high value tasks and help them from really savings, optimization, all those things. That's what is missing in the whole truth of it, is because people immediately jump onto elimination of human labor. But that's not at all what automation does. Automation really brings optimization into an enterprise and simplicity into an enterprise. Now you ask me about IBM. So what we are doing. So let me step back and give you, if you don't mind, a high-level answer on what is an enterprise, right? I mean, if you look at an enterprise, to simplify it, there is two core elements. One is the line of business, who is developing the applications, who's dealing with the business side of things. Then there's the IT, which is managing the applications and making sure that they're doing everything at all times, providing resources to the business line of business to make sure that those applications are securely and running at all times. Because if I'm a retailer and if my retail application goes down, then my business is down, right? So those applications are so critical, and IT's only reason of existence is to make sure those applications are running at all times with enough resources, with enough performance capabilities and capacities. So within the line of business, I would say there are 5 things that you need to automate the line of business. If you look at pure automation, one is process mining. which is all about taking the process and figuring out, how can we automate that process? And I can get a lot more detailed, but given the time frame, I would say I'll leave it process mining. But process mining is basically a database logging of a process where you can really say who is running this process, how long did it take, is it a straight through process or is there human touch, all those things, and then figuring out in a nice visual way to say, hey, there's a 90% chance that we can automate it. The second piece for line of business to automate is all around RPA, which is the robotic process automation. Now, people, since it says RPA, people think RPA is process automation. To me, RPA is more of a task automation. So if you're sitting in front of a computer, typing in a bunch of things, it records it and it can automate that digitally 100%, whatever that you have done. So that's the second piece. The third one is workflow. And I before mentioned everything in life is a workflow. So workflow plays a very critical role for an enterprise. The fourth piece is all around document processing. So when you digitize an enterprise, when you automate an enterprise, you really need to make sure that you can really automate the document processing. An insurance claim comes in. Instead of someone looking at that document and typing it in, can you extract the fields that you need automatically and plug it into the places where you need? And all of a sudden, you have digitized that entire journey, right? So that's document processing. Last but not least is all around how do we do rules engine or decisions, meaning even if there's a human touch involved in a workflow or a process, can you use the rules engine to make that decision? Now, all of a sudden, you have taken a process end to end and digitized it using these 5 elements. So those are the 5 things that you need from a line of business. And let me quickly get into a couple more things, and then I know I'm giving you a long-winded answer, but I'm really excited and happy about automation since you asked. So the IT side, I would say it all starts with observability.
Yeah.
How do you observe your end-to-end enterprise, whether it's public cloud, private cloud, hybrid view, because you need to observe to make decisions, right? So it all starts with observability, and that's where the APM vendors comes in, right? Application performance monitoring to make sure your applications have a complete visibility end to end. The second piece is how do we make sure that once you observe it, you make it actionable. So you observed your application is starving for resources, but what actions are you taking to make sure that that application is getting enough resources at all time? Once again, if I'm a retailer, I have a retail application. I don't want it ever going down. I want to make sure that application have resources 100% of the time. So 1 is observability, 2 is actionable observability or application resource management. That's where we acquired a company called Turbonomic that comes in. The third piece is how do you avoid an issue before it happens? And if it happens, how do you remediate it quickly using AI? So that's what I call it, AI ops or what I call issue avoidance and issue resolution. Because you don't want, if I'm a large bank, first of all, I don't want any issue coming in. But if an issue comes in, I need that MTTR or mean time to resolution is as fast as possible. So that's the business and IT. And there's a set of tools that holds them together or integrate them together, like the API economy. How do you make sure there are a bunch of connectors between our applications? How do you use Kafka to drive messages and derive? How do you make sure the events are flowing right? That's the enterprise. And since you asked me from an IBM perspective, we have focused on bringing a complete set of tools to our clients to say, hey, we have the set of tools to automate your business, IT, and bring the integration of the two together. Rather than you go to one vendor for one tool, you go to another vendor for process mining, you go to another vendor for RPA. It takes you tremendous amount of time to really go integrate and bring it all together, Neil, because no enterprise can take the time to bring 5 set of tools and try to integrate it all together when you have those 5 set of tools already tightly integrated. So that's what we are doing from a software side. The second piece of it is like software is one piece. You also need services or skills to come and automate. If you look at our IBM consulting, we have 140,000 plus professionals who can come and help you automate your enterprise. So what a great story, right? I mean, that's the story we want to bring it to our clients. It's like, look, we are not just focused on robotic process automation because we know just RPA is not enough. You need process mining, you need workflow, and you need decisions along with it. We have all 4 tools tightly integrated. We can bring our services folks to help you with that. And that's the story that has been resonating with our customers. And, even if you look at like HFS research, which is publicly out there, they did a research with, I think, 1,000 enterprise customers, and IBM was picked as the number 1 because we have the set of tools, we have the expertise with services, which clearly differentiates us. I mean, long answer, but I wanted to make sure that our viewers understood it.
And another big problem that all those business leaders are experiencing at the moment is the aftermath of the Great Resignation, combined with this growing tech skill shortage right now. So on that side of things, though, can you expand on how automation is actually helping close the skills gap by solving the shortage of data scientists and developers that the industry is typically experiencing right now? Because, again, it's a big talking point, isn't it, at the moment?
Yeah. It is huge for clients. I'll give you another example, a client example, a large telecom provider in Canada. I was taking through the automation strategy and really good dialogue with their executives. And, towards the end one of their executives said, Dinesh, it's not just all these things like the resignation is going, skill shortage, complexity, all those things are there. But there's another element to all of this, which is the pace of growth that we are going through. We are going through a huge pace of growth with 5G and other things that's coming in, and we cannot hire people fast enough and train them fast enough. So automation becomes a very critical piece to bring into an enterprise, because now you can use automation to augment that shortage of skills or someone who has left. I mean, think about it, Neil. So let's say somebody worked in an enterprise 30 years or 20 years or 10 years. When that individual leaves, all the skills, all the knowledge that person has is gone out of the enterprise. It's gone, right? Yeah. Unless you train someone else to go do it. The benefit that automation brings is that the skills, the knowledge stays. Because if you take an end-to-end workflow, if you take RPA, RPA meaning a bot that you have created, the bot is there in enterprise to stay. The bot is not leaving. So now the most critical piece for an enterprise is the skills and the knowledge that end up staying with automation, whether it's the workflow, whether it's the events, whether it's the bots or APIs, that all stays. So really driving digitization and automation is a huge boon for enterprises, because they get to keep the skills and knowledge within the enterprise. Unlike a human labor, if he or she leaves, they also take the knowledge and skills with them, which becomes a huge human labor shortage or human knowledge shortage or human skills shortage for the enterprises. So that's a benefit that enterprises get, is all around keeping that knowledge and skills within the enterprises and augmenting it as the processes change or as the business change, which really helps them. So to me, I would say that every enterprise will be forced to digitize 100%. They will have to be, if you're not already on a digitization journey, you will have to digitize 100%. Over the next 10 years, we are going to see that over and over and over. And there is no digitization without automation. If I could leave one phrase out of this talk, Neil, is that I would say there is no digitization without automation. Automation is the underpinnings of digitization. Whether you take an insurance company, right? I mean, how wonderful it would be, an accident happens, you take a picture with the click of a button, you send it to your underwriter looks at it, AI uses those pictures to figure out what kind of damage, get a quote, send it to the body shop, and All you have to do is get the car there and the work is done. Complete end-to-end digitization, no human touch involved. That's the benefit of it. From a customer perspective, you got a happy customer. From a enterprise perspective, one, happy customer, and two, no paperwork, meaning it's end-to-end digitization. What do you need for that, right? Of course, workflow. You need a decision or rules engine, and then you need a document processing. Once you have all three, you are ready to go. So to me, digitization is, like I said in the early beginning, is the very critical path that every enterprise need to do. And there is no digitization without automation. So skills and everything else comes very critical to it as part of that journey.
Such a powerful message you delivered there with that answer. And if we look beyond that, well, so many businesses are on that journey of digitization, but they're also finding that technical debt and the complexity of their legacy systems are holding them back. And many challenges arise for enterprises when dealing with that complexity of those legacy systems. So on that point, are there any tips or insights you can share around this? Because I would imagine it's something that you see time and time again too, right?
So, this goes back to my earlier point on complexity. And complexity exists within every enterprise. Every enterprise has it. And especially, the larger the enterprise, the larger the amount of complexity. One, you got to modernize your assets. You got to modernize your applications. And all enterprise are on that journey, which means, how do you re-architect it? How do you make sure that, you have the right set of tools to do that? But modernization is not an easy task, meaning once you modernize, so let's say you take an application which used to be running, at 3 milliseconds and giving customers what's needed. And it has multiple touch points. I'll take a very simple application like credit application. You apply for credit. That application also calls a third party to get credit score. And get the credit score. So it's not just a simple application that's running. Usually every application enterprise is pretty complex and complicated that it calls third-party touch points. Now, when you modernize it, right? You are creating a bunch of microservices, for example, and running it as a pod and on a very critical path. How do you make sure you get that same level of performance that you used to have? That's the question the enterprise need to ask. So I would say complexity, to take it out, you obviously have to modernize. But with modernization also comes great deal of responsibility, because you have to make sure that application still runs at that same performance or better to drive the level of benefits that enterprise used to have. Because what is the point of modernizing an application and all of a sudden your performance has gone down and the customers are complaining, right? So you have to do all those things. So I would say the tip that I have for enterprises is that, one, digitize, because digitization will drive modernization of your applications. Digitization will bring automation into the picture. And digitization will always be based on data-driven decisions. So to me, the focus would be digitization with the modernization on applications is the focus that customers need to do to take out complexity out of their enterprises.
And I would also say that every business is also challenged right now with meeting the rising expectations of their customers. And I think it was about 6-7 years ago that IBM originally warned of this in the quote that went something like, the last best experience that anyone has anywhere becomes the standard experience that they want everywhere. So when it comes to increasing digitization and increasing fast, how can automation help with that?
I think I covered it as part of the earlier discussion, which is all around IT and line of business. So the digitization can be helped when you really go focus on automation on IT and go focus on automation on line of business, because those are the two core elements in every single enterprises that need to be successfully digitized or automated for them to succeed, because that's where the complexity exists. That's where the digitization exists, and that's where we can drive more and more automation. So for enterprises, I would say focus on line of business. What processes? How can you automate a task? What events are happening? And those events can be used for data-driven decisions. How can we use AI within enterprises across the line of business? Same thing on IT. Like I said, how do you start with observability? How do you make sure it's actionable or resource management perspective? How do we make sure that there's no issue how can you predict an issue before it happens? And if it happens, how do you avoid it? So, those are some of the things that I would say, an enterprise need to focus, especially from a line of business and IT perspective.
Well, we've talked so much about some of the big talking points that are affecting enterprises of all sizes out there at the moment. And I'm curious, if we dare to look into the future, what excites you about that future? And also, what excites you about the role that IBM will play in that too?
I'm excited. I'm excited because there is a lot of opportunity in automation. The pandemic, the events that's happening in the world, all those things are really driving automation ever more than before, ever. And the digitization journey that we are going to see is going to be humongous for the next decade. There's no question about it, because everybody wants to digitize. And I'll give you one example, Neil. This is Export Development Bank in Egypt, which was founded in 1983, to really focus on the Egyptian exports in all sectors, including agriculture, industrial, and commercial. They adopted exactly what I talked about from a Cloud Pak for Business Automation on all 5 pillars, and then Cloud Pak for integration focused on APIs and events, to really enable the bank to launch a retail banking services. And now, if you look at it, that Export Bank's digital banking transfers improved by 80% from 10 minutes to 2 minutes. And the interbank services have gone from 4 minutes to 4 minutes per transfer to 50 transfers per minute. So wow. Think about the impact that that's just one bank example, but think about it, right? From a banking perspective, from that enterprise perspective, the benefits are huge, humongous. And that's why they're all driving towards digitization and automation. And that's what excites me about the future, is that we as customers are going to benefit huge from the work that enterprises are doing from a digitization and automation, because we are the beneficiaries of that. And I'm really excited about the future.
Well, I've loved chatting with you today. And we began talking about your origin story, what put you on this path. And as we come full circle now, I'm going to ask you to leave the listeners with a personal touch of inspiration by sharing either a book that has inspired you, or maybe a song that helps you get your head in the zone, or a song that's important to you. What are you going to leave us with today? And is there a story behind your choice?
The story behind my choice was, look, I always say that, everything in life is a workflow, and the workflow is driven by 2 things. That's events and data. And data becomes the mother of everything. It is everything that we all live on. And I was very fortunate, Neil, to really early on see that I want to be part of that data process, that data lifecycle, and the data governance that exists in enterprises. And I was fortunate to be part of IBM journey, and I continue to be. So to me, it was all driven by, data. And early on, I saw it, and I was excited to be part of the journey with IBM.
Oh, wow. What a great story. And for anyone listening that just wants to explore the topic of automation a little bit deeper, find out more information about the work that you're doing, I appreciate that the IBM website is a huge place. So is there anywhere in particular you'd like to point listeners in the direction of to explore further?
Well, IBM website has all the information, and then obviously we have our IBM Automation page, where it gives you a lot of information. And then, obviously reach out to me personally. I'm also here at any time. Love to talk about automation.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me today. I love your story, how it began with you and your curious mind, really, and just thinking about how you can use data to predict the future, and how everything around us is essentially a workflow. And even now, fast forward to present day, it's that fact that there isn't a digitization without automation. It's an amazing story. I love how it all clicks together. So thank you so much for taking the time to share that with me, and of course the great work that you're doing at IBM. Thank you.
No, thank you so much, Neil. Really appreciate the time.
So a huge thank you to Dinesh for sharing his story and how IBM plans to accelerate automation adoption in 2022, and also the key industry challenges and trends that he's seeing that businesses are facing today, especially with some of those conversations that he's having with business leaders all over the world. But now this is your chance to get your voice heard too. What resonated with you today with our conversation? Do your experiences differ from what we have covered? Well, I'll put the microphone over to you now. Please email me directly, techblogwriter@outlook.com. Connect and send me a DM on LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram @Neil C. Hughes, and pop by my website, techblogwriter.co.uk. There's a contact form there. You can learn more about how to work with me and also browse through over 2,000 interviews, because I don't only host this podcast, Tech Talks Daily, I also host Tech Fusion with Citrix as well. So feel free to check that out. Let's stay in touch. And why not join me again tomorrow and we'll do it all again. So a big thank you for listening as always. And until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thank you for listening to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast with Neil C. Hughes. Remember, technology works best when it brings people together.